Hi. This evening we're taping from Van Allen's nursing home, and we have two World War I veterans that we're going to be getting their experiences from. The first is Mr. Harold Pickert. Mr. Pickert, were you a draftee or did you join the Army?
No, I was drafted. I was in college. I was in the University of Pennsylvania. And I was given final examinations to, for free and go into the service. So that was all right. But when I came home, then I had that, they wanted me to take final examinations in every one of the courses. I told them to go to hell with their university and everything else, and I said, don't ever come and ask me for money. They have a couple of times, and I told them.
All right. And you went into the Army. Where did you get basic training then? Basic training.
We were in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, right down in Florida.
Yeah. And with our winter uniforms.
Yeah, yeah.
And sweat, boy.
I can imagine. How long were you there?
About a week.
Was that all for basic training?
I went in the Army on the 28th of May.
Yeah.
And I sailed for England on the 4th of July. See how much training I had.
You didn't get very much training.
Well, I had to go to Florida. I had to come back to Camp Meade,
train,
go over to another place, and I had to be sworn in.
And this is all by train.
All that was in that time.
Yeah. And you told me just before we started that they didn't even give you a rifle in basic training.
I was trained with a broom until we got on the boat to go over to Germany and fight. Then they gave us a rifle.
All right. What kind of rifle? Springfield?
Yeah, it was a good one. It was the 30 gunman.
Yeah, 30-06 gun. Yeah. I've seen some. In fact, I own one that was made in Ilion during the war. It shoots the same ammunition, but they're slightly different from the original Springfield rifles. Yeah.
Well, see, I was in the 6th Division, and that was a federal gunman.
Yeah.
They just came from the Philippines.
Yeah.
Back. And that's when I was a draftee.
Yeah.
And I was put in to fill out. So because the people that were in the Army there,
the regulars,
weren't sufficient. They were only, I think something like in our company, 120 or 110, and they had to build it up, and they pulled them out of the street.
Well, they needed manpower at that time for the big offensive coming up in 1918 there, yes. And what kind of ship did you go overseas on?
I was on a cattle boat.
Cattle boat?
And they hadn't cleaned it out. We had to sleep down in the hall. Yeah. It was a pretty smelly place. But I came back in style on the Leviathan.
Leviathan, I've heard of that. That was a big luxury line.
That was
those days.
The biggest boat afloat.
One of the Cunard Line boats, I think it was. How long did it take to go? You went from New York City or Baltimore, or where was it?
We went from New York over to Liverpool.
Yeah.
We landed in Liverpool. Yeah. And then we went down to the south of England, and then we went across on that big trip across with a whole bunch of them.
Did you know anybody when you were drafted from this area?
Yeah, a few. I've forgotten who they were now. I know there was one got me in a card game, and he was a shark. See? He thought he could take me. And right off, I was suspicious, and so I was dealt a pretty good hand. See?
But not quite good enough.
I said, well, not bad. You aren't going to bid? I said, no. And it was disappointing.
Yeah, that was a pretty good giveaway. Well, you got to Liverpool, and then you went right across England by the English Railroad.
Down across to, what was the name of that debarkation? Went over to,
Southampton, maybe?
yeah, I think that was it.
It might have been the one.
Went over to Le Havre, was it?
Le Havre, yeah, that's one of the French
That's
seaports.
where we went in.
And then you went there. Well, now you'd only had a week of training.
Then we went to Le Tracy. That was in the Vosges
Yeah.
district.
Uh-huh.
And there's where we got our training.
Right behind the lines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that was probably in the middle of July, end of July that year.
yeah.
Was that the year the Germans put on a big offensive that summer? Their last shot, actually, or not?
No,
I don't know
not
if they
that I
did or not.
remember.
I'd have to check that out.
We were in what they called the Sightseeing Six. We were on more fronts
Yeah.
and did less fighting,
Well,
and
that's
lost less men than any other outfit over there.
wow.
But they forget to tell you that on one time we walked up and down behind the lines, going to go in. We were shock troops, see?
Yeah.
We were going to go in, but when we got there, we couldn't catch up to the boys in front. They were driving the Germans back so fast we couldn't
Catch them.
And then there'd be another place that would be holding, and they'd pull us out and march us down there. I think it was 500 kilometers
It's about 350 miles, pretty
Yeah.
close, yeah.
up and down behind the lines.
You probably spent a lot of time in the mud there in France. From
Yeah,
pictures I've
and,
seen of it, it looked
another
pretty
thing
muddy.
we did, we were very short of water, and these where the horses had stepped,
Yeah.
was water in there, and we used to dip that up and drink that.
Yeah. Wow, that must have been pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, well, when you're thirsty, you drink
When you're
most
thirsty,
anything.
yeah. The summer get pretty hot there in France?
Pretty fair.
Pretty hot. And then you were there probably right up till the armistice then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
What
we
kind
lost more men on the night of the armistice than we did during the war, I guess.
Yeah.
There was 3 or 4 got killed with their own guns. They got drunk first,
Oh,
and then they were
yeah.
fooling around and didn't know it was loaded.
Didn't know it.
They
Little
thought
accident.
they'd taken all the shells out.
What were you, a rifleman, machine gunner, or what was your?
I was a corporal. I went in the Army, a buck private, and went over in that Dradimer section, and they had to have messengers along the front.
Right.
And I don't know, there'd be 5 or 6 sergeants and corporals playing cards up in the room, and the captain would come and motion me out. I said to him after a couple of times, I said, "Captain, sir," I said, "there's corporals and sergeants up there that are better equipped to do this job. You're a college man, aren't you?" Well, you think. They just do what they're told, and that's all.
Right.
So he said, if you want the stripes, when we come out, you'll have them. So when we came back to a rest area, I had my corporal stripes.
All right. How much did corporals make at that point in time?
I think it was about $36.
A month.
Mm.
Yeah. Not very much money.
No.
To today's. Did you get any leaves there when you were in France? You get to see
I
Paris?
never
or
had
anything?
a never had a leave until I was, all the war was all over and everything, and then they passed them out, and I went to the south of France, to that Grenoble,
Grenoble, I've heard of it, yeah.
and that's Marcy, Mount Marcy, is it,
Saturday.
down there? anyway, I went down there, and I had 10 days leave.
All right.
Because the captain came and saw me, and he said, now, you'll have, I was one of the first ones to get a leave. He said, you never had leave when you were back in the States. I said, I wasn't in long enough to get a leave. Well, he said, you have one now. And later, met me on the street one night. We were talking about coming home, see, and we were having a little party. Our liquid refreshments ran out, and I could talk a little German. I had 2 years of high school German, and I could motion pretty good too. So the captain used to get me a lot of times as an interpreter
For
for
German
the Germans.
prisoners, yeah.
Because
Did you have to guard prisoners different times?
yeah, well, I never did a KP, and I never did a guard duty, excepting as a non-commissioned officer. That is quite a record.
It is. You didn't miss a thing.
Not
Believe me.
especially KP.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But I'll tell you how. My name was Pickert, and there was another guy there, Pickett, Pickett.
Oh yeah.
And they'd call Pickert or Pickett, didn't matter which. I'd sit right there.
And he would
Come
go.
on. He was about 6'2". Come on, you blankety blank, long drink of water. Drag yourself over here. I just came over KP yesterday. Shut up and get on there.
They got him.
So that was.
What was life like in the trenches there, in dugouts? A lot of rats and a lot
Well, I'll tell you
bad,
what,
bad
I was
conditions.
sleeping with this one guy at night, and the rats came in, crawled in the blankets between us.
Yeah.
I said, you roll to the right, and I'll roll right, follow you. And we heard him squeal, and we laid there, and in the morning we pulled our blankets out and shook out one dead rat.
Killed one of them anyway.
We got one of them anyway.
That was pretty unsanitary conditions over
Yeah,
there, I
yeah.
understand, pretty much. Well, did you see any of those artillery barrages that were famous in World War I? Real
No,
heavy stuff.
No, but we saw an aerial battle.
Oh, yeah.
They were coming over to shoot up our column. See, we were marching up to the front, and they came over, 3 or 4 German planes, and down came, out of the clouds above, came an American squadron.
Yeah.
They shot a couple of them down, but it was quite exciting to watch.
I imagine it would be. Well, I don't suppose one of them was the Red Baron, but it was probably...
Huh?
I don't suppose one of them was Richthofen, the Red Baron.
No, sir.
Probably not, because I
No,
think the
no.
British shot him down.
The Red Baron.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about the Army food at that point? Did they feed you reasonable well over there, or was it bad?
Well, they got a lot of pretty good food, but the mess sergeant used to trade it off with the French gals.
Oh,
And so we had the tough part of the meat, and the French girls got the good part of the meat.
well, that's too bad. I don't know. It's pretty difficult. A lot of civilians right in that area, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And there were some very nice French people that would be nice to us. And then there are others that tried to hook us for everything they could.
Well, you get that, I think, anyway. Yeah.
Get that right in the United States.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know.
Anytime.
You got to watch out.
Yeah.
Well, you know, here it is in September 1918, October, the Germans are retreating and you're following them. Did you get into German territory at all, or did you stop before you got there?
We got in at Koblenz after the war was over. we got in there, and then it was on our way back and forth. Each time we'd move, we were thought was going home.
Yeah.
But it would go someplace else. It kept you happy that way.
Yeah, keep you moving around and distracted.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen pictures of the front line area in World War I. Extreme desolation. Nothing growing, no trees, no grass. You saw that.
Yeah.
You ever see any gas attacks or anything like that?
I was in one. When I was taking one of those messages along the front,
Yeah.
we came to this one place. We came down, the first guy I saw had a gas mask on.
Yeah.
I hadn't smelt any gas. I sniffed good then, and I told him, I said, I pulled my mask out and showed him, and I said, no. Then he took his mask off, and they found out they had had a gas attack, a few shells of it, not amount to anything. So.
Boy, a gas mask, I had put one on once, and you know, the fog's up and you can't see out of it, and it is a miserable thing, but of course necessary if you're going to survive that, I imagine. Yeah.
Well, another thing, if you had wore glasses,
Yeah.
you had to either save your eyes or save your life.
Yeah.
You had to pull it down right over the glasses because you didn't have much extra time if the shells were hitting around close.
Well, the war ended in November 11th, 1918.
Yeah.
You were up on the front line at that time.
Yeah.
As you said, some of your people got killed with the celebration. I imagine you were real happy that it was all over.
Oh boy, you bet.
Yeah.
And another thing, after it was over, we policed Verdun up and down the front there.
Uh-huh.
You'd see a shoe, you'd pull it out, and there'd be a leg, piece of a leg fastened onto it. And we'd save that and put it on a pile, see, so that they could bury them.
And you were on a burial detail that picked up the pieces.
Picking up the...
That must have been pretty graves registration detail, I think they used to call those, and that's nothing that's too desirable to do.
No.
Verdun was real bad. The British lost an awful lot of people there. Yeah, a lot of heavy artillery barrages and all that.
Yeah.
Did you see the cathedral there and all the buildings that were pretty well smashed? I mean, I've seen pictures, but
I
that's
didn't see too much of that because we never got in the big cities at all until after the war, and then we could go around. Of course, they were cleaning up stuff as fast as they could.
Yeah. Imagine there's a lot of unexploded ordnance around there,
I
too.
bet it's in the ground right over there right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's quite a bunch of it.
Yeah. I remember about 20 years ago, there was something about the farmer was digging somewhere and he found a helmet. And he dug under the helmet, there was a guy. And there was evidently a whole squad along this trench, and the shell caved the whole thing along. And there were 4 or 5 people that were missing and dead. They were all British, I think, under these helmets. And they'd been there since 1918, and this had to be 1960 some odd, pretty close to 40 years.
Yeah.
So they're still finding stuff on those battlefields.
Yeah.
Well, the war ended, and then you moved around quite a bit, and then, of course, they sent you home.
Yeah.
You came home on the Leviathan, you said.
Yeah.
That must have been a pretty good trip with a ship
And a
like that.
funny thing, Harold Hector was a medical disease, was a chemist for making medicine.
Yeah.
In Little Falls before he went in. And he was on the boat in the medical department, and we never knew it. We came across the ocean together and never even saw each other.
Probably you could put 10,000, 12,000 people on that Leviathan.
He probably had his
Cram them in.
work to tend to anyway.
I've seen pictures of them arriving in New York. They're hanging off that ship like flies, you know. Look like they're really loaded
What
with
was it
people.
when they came back on there? Was it 5,000?
Could have been more than that. Could have been. Yeah.
It was an awful bunch. We only got 2 meals a day because the kitchen couldn't take care of with all the people that had to be fed. There wasn't any bunch that could do the work for 3 meals a day, but 2 meals a day they could
do it.
Make it.
They could do it. Then you arrived back in New York Harbor. Then where'd you go from there?
Well, when I landed in Little Falls, we landed in New York, and when I got up to Little Falls, I met my wife.
You were married before you
No.
went in? Oh, no.
I met who was to be my
Going on,
wife,
right.
and I never knew her all the time I was over there, so I didn't have to write a whole bunch of foolish letters.
Well, that's good. That saved
Yeah.
postage stamps and everything.
Yeah, so I
He's all right.
All right. That's
didn't
good.
do any letter writing.
You didn't get any Dear John letters that way. During the Korean War, they called them Dear John letters when
Yeah,
you went in
no.
service. And you had
Oh,
it your own.
yeah.
I got one of those one time. It was, we won't talk too much about that, but that was no problem for you. How long did it take them to discharge you after that?
Oh, it wasn't long. Well, I think it was something like 3 or 4 days, and we were out.
We were out, yeah.
They fired us right through.
Yeah. Was that at Fort Dix or in those places, or where?
I think it was, is that the one in New Jersey?
Right, there are 2, Fort Dix and Camp Kilmer.
Well,
2 of them.
yeah, I guess it seems Kilmer seems to ring a bell. I think it was Camp Kilmer.
During the Korean War, they discharged through Camp Kilmer. That's where they let me
Yeah, I
out.
think
That
that's-
might have been it. Dix was more of a training base, and Kilmer was a separation center, as they call
Yeah.
it. Then. Right out and then home to Little Falls. Then what'd you do after you got home?
Tried to find a job.
Tough times for a while after the war?
There wasn't any jobs open at all. And they said I could have my job back, and I went down to Snyder's and see if I could, about my job. Said, yeah, you can have your job back. We'll fire Smith. I was a time clerk. And he said, we'll fire Smith. He's got a wife and a child. And well, I said, you can go plumb to hell with your plan.
Never went back there.
So I went up and got a job in Taylor's hardware store.
Where was that? Right on Main Street?
On Main Street here. And I worked in there for a year, a little over a year. And then Odie Buckland, I don't know whether you remember him.
Photographer.
He was president of the Little Falls National Bank.
Well, that wasn't the Buckland who was the photographer.
No,
Oh, different.
that was Myers Buckland. That's Odie
Yeah.
Buckland. And we had, that's what I have trouble. I'll be telling something, and you see, I'm 91 years old.
You're doing real well for 91.
Yeah. And that's one, and I'm quite hard of hearing. That's why I always do a lot of talking.
Well, that's
Because
it.
if I'm talking, the other person can't talk, see? So I don't have to listen to.
Well, that's all right. Then you worked in the bank for a long
Then
period of time.
I worked in the bank for
Yeah.
39 years.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and then Fritz Steele was president when I got out. He said, to stay 2 more years and the 2 of us will get out together. I said, you can get out whenever you want to.
Yeah.
I'm getting out this year.
All right.
So I got out.
Well, they didn't treat the World War I veterans all that well when they came home, did they?
No.
World War II,
Well,
they had different rules.
That is why the World War II veterans got everything on a
Yeah.
platter.
Yeah.
The World War I boys were back of them.
That's
and
good.
wanting,
Yep.
knew what they had to go through, and I wanted them.
Yep.
Of course, I didn't expect half of them to go into college, but a lot of them
A lot
did.
of them did. That GI Bill is a very,
But
very
they never
good-
paid the college debt back.
Well, well, Mr. Pickert, it's been real good talking with you
I'll just get started.
about where you were working and what you're doing for you. And